others. But when you grow up in Montreal, it's catechism. You must love the Canadians. That's easy to do. Oh, sorry. It used to be easy to do when I lived there.
Sure.
Ken Dryden, Larry Robinson, I was there for that. Yes. I know I don't look old enough, but I promise you that I was there for all of that. Anyway, you must love the Canadians, and you must hate specifically the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs. You've got to, hate on them.
I've never had a hard time feeling strong feelings about the Toronto Maple Leafs. But, hey, let's talk. I don't know if this is politics. I mean, it is politics, but it's a story that expands beyond that. Pierre Poilievre is writing an open letter to Twitter a couple of weeks ago asking that the CBC's account be labeled as so-called government-funded media. And what do you know? Over the weekend, as you can see right here, there it is, right in the bio of the CBC's official account on Twitter, government-funded media. It's a win, optically, for Poilievre. Take us into how you're feeling about all this.
Every day, it doesn't matter whether he's talking to a CP reporter and says something like, you might want to check your question with the ethics commissioner, or running videos with Hitler and Stalin in them, and then positioning himself, Poilievre, as the Churchill, and now the CBC, trying to get the Twitter to somehow stick a knife in the back of the CB. Brian, help me with this. You went to high school. I went to high school. There was always somebody in high school that was just so creepy that people just kind of stayed away from him. Okay, we don't have to get all politically correct about this and say that nobody should ever suffer that way. Blah blah. I don't want to get into that. There was always someone who 99.9% of people just felt really uncomfortable with. Does Poilievre not strike you in every way, almost every day, with all of these stories, as that guy that we just didn't want to shoot pool with?
Yeah, well, it's, to me, I don't know if I use the word. I just think it's more snide. It's just like a little. It oozes of insincerity. I mean, Johnny, why don't we load up that clip? So apologies here. I just grabbed the audio off Twitter. This was recorded obviously on a cell phone, but this is an exchange over the weekend with Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and a reporter. Now, the reporter is not technically from the CBC. They're from the Canadian press. Most people understand that the Canadian press, like Reuters or any other service, the AP, can make stories available, and then outlets like the CBC can pick them up, can pay for the story and run them. So this is not a CBC, this is a Canadian press reporter asking a question of Pierre Poilievre, and here's how he responded.
You work for CP?
Yes, I do.
So your biggest client is CBC, right?
Yes, but my
that's right. I just want to be careful that we don't get you in a conflict of interest here. Have you checked with the ethics commissioner on whether you're in a conflict of interest in asking about CBC funding, given that it's the principal source of money for CP?
You see what I mean? He's just being snide, and all of this, I think, is part of a bigger picture conversation about the future of the CBC, the role that the CBC plays, funding that the CBC receives, and how it receives that funding. In other words, to whom is it accountable? And I think that it's probably disingenuous to suggest that the government, in other words, the partisan liberal government, is playing a role in the editorial content that the CBC pushes out. This is what I hope that people are smart enough or informed enough to be focusing on.
All right. So I'll try to lighten up, but there are times where, that's a little difficult because, I have studied authoritarianism, and authoritarians always do this. This is what they kind of lead with. But just answer this question for me, Ryan. When the government-funded CBC was government-funded and the government was operated by the Harper Conservatives, and that included, of course, Pierre Poilievre. Did Pierre Poilievre ever complain that the CBC was a tool, a poodle of the Harper government?
Yeah. No, I don't think I caught that one. I must have missed that one, yeah.
But what about the military? I understand. I could be wrong. Maybe my sources are too liberal. Maybe I'm just not plugged in to the conservative truth of the matter. But is the Canadian military funded by the government?
I mean, I guess you'd have to say that in a way it is.
Okay, so in a way, the Canadian military is funded by. So is the Canadian military like a private militia for Justin Trudeau? I mean, I know that the questions sound absurd, but the only reason I'm asking absurd questions is because I've got to illustrate. Because a picture's worth 1,000 words. I've got to illustrate the absurdity of this idea that anything that is government funded, therefore, is some sort of private lapdog of Justin Trudeau. I mean, you've got everyone knows how I feel about Danielle Smith. I'm not exactly big on her. I've endorsed Rachel Notley, but I'm not going to say that anybody who works as a police officer in Edmonton or Calgary is working for Danielle Smith because the government funds cops. I mean, just how far does one want to go with this? Beyond everything else, how much can you insult the intelligence of the Canadian people, whether they're living in Alberta or Ontario or wherever? How much can you insult them and still consider yourself a credible leader of what you think of as a national governing party? How can you think of yourself as prime minister worthy when you indulge in this stuff that, I don't know, the people, people have the mentality of 8-year-olds, embrace this stuff. And I understand there's a basis, whatever the base. 10% of the people in the country love this stuff. I get that. But I'm talking about the majority of Canadians, just normal Canadians. How can you keep insulting normal Canadians and expect to have any moral authority?
Yeah, well, I mean, and I just think that it's a short-term play, not a long-term play. The whole, it just sort of like the whole defund the CBC movement. I mean, so CBC Radio Canada, from its account, pointing out after receiving this government or media account label on Twitter, says Twitter's own policy defines government-funded media as cases where the government may have varying degrees of involvement over editorial content, which is clearly not the case with CBC. And here's where I say, if you want to say, is the Canadian military government funded or is the CBC government funded? Here's the distinction. CBC and many other departments, there's a ton. You look at the federal budget, we're talking, obviously billions and billions and billions of dollars publicly funded through a parliamentary appropriation voted on by all members of parliament, right? In other words, not just the government, not just the Liberals. The CBC's editorial independence protected in law in the Broadcasting Act. They said, as we said in our statement from last week, I'm not carrying water for the CBC. I have nothing to gain from this. As a matter of fact, in a way, Chuck, I suppose we compete with the CBC. But what I see here is a politician taking something that he knows is obviously a trigger point for a lot of the more vociferous members of his base and torquing it. But what's the end game here? Like, what do you say to a CBC reporter that's out in the field right now doing their work as this temperature gets turned up and up and up from the Conservative leader?
Ryan, let's please put our cards on the table because we call the show Real Talk. Isn't part of this about telling the private sector, which we worked in for decades, private sector, you better play ball with us. You better not be tough on us. You better all be friendlies. Now, I realize that, some talk show hosts and some others are automatically friendlies because they want access. And then some people completely whore themselves for access. In this case, I'm talking about whoring themselves for access to Pierre Poilievre, and will say nothing ever unkind, nothing critical about Pierre Poilievre because they want him on their show. I mean, fine, that's the way the game is played. But the question here is, isn't part of this about simply telling everyone in private sector media, whether they're doing the papers or the radio, television, web, whatever, that you'd better not be nasty with us, because if you are, we're going to target you. We're going to put a target on your back, and we're going to call you names, and we're going to say that you're a shill you're in the tank with, you're a liberal.
Let me ask every member of this listening or viewing audience what they think might be the consequence. Like, let's try to look out 6 months or 2 years or 10 years from now, the consequence of actually defunding the CBC. If you're looking at the media business right now, if you're looking at the industry, but also the resource of the estate, if you will, the fourth estate, journalism, storytelling, history, representation, communication across the country, it's in a real tough spot. I mean, the newspaper business has been bleeding. If you look at how many small-town radio shows there are anymore, let alone 6 o'clock news broadcasts, they're done, Charles. Morning radio shows are in syndication across the country. It's very unusual to have local hosts anymore. And who ultimately suffers when stories stop being told, when corporations and politicians stop being held accountable? What happens when it doesn't make business sense for, hedge fund owned media entities to continue to operate? It's members of the public that get completely screwed. And I think that whole political torque job of defunding the CBC is short-sighted, and ultimately it hurts Canadians.
Well, putting aside that, I don't think that he'll become prime minister. I think he's screwing himself every day. He's creating an ad for the Liberal Party. You don't have to be creative. All you've got to do is, take video of Pierre Poilievre. It's easy to put 30-second, 60-second ads together. And when people do pay attention, which is not when all these polls are being done, they pay attention when the campaign is on or shortly before the campaign. It's pretty easy to politically take down Pierre Poilievre with his own words. So putting that aside, if he did make it in, if he formed some sort of minority government, I still don't think that he would defund the CBC, and there are a whole flock of reasons for that. But if we're asking about the larger problem, and the larger problem is, let's not think of ourselves, let's not think of the politicians, let's think of the people that we're supposed to think about, the public. The public needs information. The public needs information services, just as the public needs firefighters and teachers, roads, hospitals, the Canadian military. The public needs public services. So I think at some point, if the so-called business model for media falls through the grates, yes, I'm a capitalist, yes, I'm a free enterprise person, but public service is public service. And at some point, whether it's provincial governments, municipal governments, federal governments, there may have to be subsidies, there may have to be something done to have a rational conversation about giving the public, whether they're in a small town or a large city, no matter where they are in the country, access to important information. And it'll be very important not to just slag anyone who's involved in the information business as a tool of a political party, whether it's a cop or a broadcaster.
You can catch Charles Adler every Monday right here on Real Talk, the newest announced columnist for the Winnipeg Free Press, and, of course, RTDNA Lifetime Achievement Award winner. We'll talk to you again in a week, pal.
Thanks a lot.
That conversation was presented by Real Talk sponsors. We encourage you to support whenever you're able, and that includes the team at Apex Automation. Now here's a call to professional engineers across the country. This could be someone with 20, 25 years experience, or this might be somebody just graduating from engineering school. Maybe you're tuning into Real Talk. You're downloading this podcast from down in Calgary. Maybe a new engineering grad looking to get your career started with a team that's on the cutting edge of where industry is going. That includes advanced process controls, distributed control systems, autonomous vehicles, and machinery. Apex Automation's clients span across different industries, including agriculture, including food and beverage, brewing, and of course a ton in energy across Western Canada and into the U.S. If you're looking to work at a place that puts its people ahead of its profits, check out apexautomation.ca today. Hey, are you like our family, thinking about or actually making a move forward on bringing your outdoor space to life this summer? We're so excited to be partnering up with Eden Landscaping. Our backyard has just absolutely bummed us out the last couple of years. We love our dogs, but we can't stand what they're doing to our sod. Well, out is the grass, and in shall soon be installed an entirely new landscape designed with purpose by Mike and his team at Eden Landscaping. They can take your design to the next level, where you're looking for an ultra-modern design, maybe focusing more on natural beauty, or maybe you've got some stunning stonework in mind, water features, outdoor kitchens, retaining walls. There's nothing they can't do. You can check them out online. Eden Landscaping at landscapeedmonton.ca. When we talk about building, every single time we talk about building, we celebrate this space, this relatively new studio space of ours in a 110-year-old building that had its own unique challenges, including a persistent water leak when we first got the keys. The team at Complete Care Restoration said, not a problem. They solve problems professionally and have been doing so for the many, many years they've been in business, helping people out in a lot of circumstances, dealing with nightmare scenarios like fire damage, flood damage, even mold and asbestos removal. If you have a situation on your hands that is no laughing matter, don't think twice. Get in touch with Complete Care Restoration today at CompleteCareRestoration.ca. And a big shout out to those small communities. We know you're punching outside your weight class when it comes to what you're offering your constituents, your residents, and that includes paying attention to your bottom line on all the big expenditures. If you're a town, village, or even city in Alberta or Saskatchewan making big decisions on things like garbage, residential or industrial collection, recycling, any waste management issue, you're going to want to take a look at localenvironmental.ca. You know, some people might say, well, it's only garbage, but not to them. They believe that communities deserve better, and they're proving it every day in Alberta and Saskatchewan. You can learn more online today. Request a quote. Business owners, too. Best move you might make this week at localenvironmental.ca. Well, depending on when you hear this, either the puck will soon drop or perhaps it already has on the 2023 NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. Millions of fans around the world will be paying keen attention to see who will make its way, what team it will be out of that first round en route to hoisting the Stanley Cup. Derek Van Diest will be covering it all as a correspondent for NHL.com, the longtime sports reporter. Last joined us, your last check-in with this show, you were halfway around the world, wrapping up some shopping for friends and family after covering the World Cup. What an adventure that must have been.
That was a great time. Yeah, that's last time when we were in Qatar. I think I was calling you from a mall in Qatar. I was doing my Christmas shopping.
You were taking a break from Christmas shopping to give us your take on the whole experience. Hey, Congratulations on the new gig.
Thank you.
You've been working in print media for what, DVD? It's been like 20 years.
Almost 30 years, actually.
Almost 30.
28 years. I started as a freelancer here at with the Edmonton Journal. Got a full-time job in Medicine Hat. Was in Medicine Hat for about 7.5 years before I came back to the Journal. Moved over to the Sun, and then of course they both merged, and I've been part of that since. And this is a new opportunity that came up, and it was just simply too good to pass up.
Makes a whole lot of sense. And I don't know if you want to get into the muck and mire of this. I'm just talking to Charles Adler about what the business landscape looks like for newspapers and broadcasters. And boy, you must have seen a lot of changes over the past number of years as well.
We did. First off, I want to say I love Charles Adler. I grew up listening to his show.
Eh?
He's just fantastic, and he's got that great broadcaster voice. But he's just such a smart individual. I love listening to his show. So it's great that you have him on every Monday. I've seen a lot of changes, and you've seen the industry change and try and evolve. And obviously, it started with the internet age, and I think maybe they didn't handle it the way they would have. If you go back to the beginning of the internet, I think the newspapers would have maybe done it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But you've seen the industry change and evolve, and there's been. But I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of great newspaper people down the road. Like I got a lot of great people. Just love the business, love the industry. They're in it because of the love of the industry, and they love to tell stories. They love to give out information. And you ran into a lot of those people down the road, and I was blessed to be able to work in that industry for as long as I did. And now I'm lucky to work with another great group of people over at the NHL, telling those stories, telling those hockey stories. And of course, obviously we live in a hockey country and a hockey mad town, so it was a good fit.
Yeah, and here you are moving into even more of a digital landscape and a great opportunity for you, and I was excited to see it. We wanted to bring you on just to kind of shoot the shit, man, and like have coffee and talk playoffs, and this is what a lot of people are going to be doing today. And of course we're going to talk about the Edmonton Oilers and I don't know what you're thinking with regards to a Stanley Cup final matchup. Johnny thinks that it might be the Tampa Bay Lightning that make it out of the East. Of course, I think a lot of people would love to see the Edmonton Oilers make it out of the West. Colorado's looking to defend its Stanley Cup championship, but it's missing a couple of key pieces at the least. And then you've got the Bruins with a record-setting season that looks like they're going to be tough to beat. Generally speaking, what are some of the key storylines that you're paying attention to here just hours away from puck drop?
Well, it does feel like Christmas morning, doesn't it?
It does.
It's the first day of the playoffs. Feels like Christmas morning. It's very exciting. Yeah, listen, the Oilers have a great team. Let's not get carried. They have the two best players in the world on their team, and they've done a fantastic job. Ken Holland has done a fantastic job and his team of surrounding these players with a solid secondary core, I guess.
Yeah.
So you look at the Solar team, and it's tough not to get excited about the fact that this is a championship caliber team. And if things go right, they get the bounces, they can stay away from injuries, they could go all the way and win the Stanley Cup. And I predicted it'd be an Oilers-Bruins Stanley Cup. So I've seen a lot of the Bruins this year. They got a fantastic team. There's not a lot of holes in that Bruin. They got great goaltending, great defense all the way down the line. So they look like they are on a collision course to meet in the final. But of course, they play the games for a reason, right? That's why they play the games. Things can go wrong. You can get an unlucky bounce. The game's going to overtime. You never know what happens. But it's a great time to be excited to be an Oiler fan because they've suffered for so long, right? Like this town has suffered for so long. The decade of darkness had lasted about 12 years, right? They thought they came out of it in 2017. They went back into it for a couple of years. Back out of it, the bubble disappointment, the bubble playoffs, losing to Chicago, disappointment in the next year, losing in Winnipeg, and obviously last season getting to the Western Conference Final and then getting swept out by Colorado. There's a lot of anguish here in Edmonton, and they're just ready to explode, and I think this is a team that can really get behind, and I'm really excited to see because I love the city at playoff time. I don't think there's anything like it. I really think it's going to be a fantastic spring here in Edmonton, and if the Oilers do what they're expected to do, it could be really a really fun ride for the next couple of months.
Yeah, a lot of times for a team to become a championship team, it has to get pumped, and it has to learn to lose. But it's tough for fans to swallow that, isn't it? To understand. But how significant do you think it might be? Colorado was, it was a wagon last year, and the Avalanche just appeared to be sort of fulfilling its own destiny as a franchise to hoist that Stanley Cup under Nathan McKinnon's leadership, and maybe even more so Cale Makar's incredible skill and leadership. But how do you think that factors into it? Maybe even a more motivated Connor McDavid, who I think is 63, 64 goals this year, 153 points. Yeah. The first to do that, only the sixth NHLer of all time to score at 150. The guy's just on a mission, so much so that other remarkable campaigns like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Leon Draisaitl, barely anybody's talking about them because of what Connor's doing. Is he hungrier even this year than he was last year?
He is, and that's kind of a scary thought if you're the rest of the teams in the league. You saw what Connor McDavid, the level he took his game to in the regular season. Playoffs, everyone elevates their game. How high can Connor McDavid elevate his game to? That it's almost scary to think how good this guy can be in the playoffs when everything's on the line, and he is determined to win it. He is very much like Nathan McKinnon was last year. He's very much like Steve Stamkos was the year before. These guys, regardless of all the individual accolades, they'll take the individual accolades, but they are here to win a Stanley Cup championship. They are going to be known for winning Stanley Cup championship. Sidney Crosby's known for winning 3 cups. Alex Ovechkin, a great player. He had to win the cup to really cement his legacy. Yeah. All those great players, they have to win to cement their legacy, and Connor McDavid is determined to do that, and he has the tools to do it, but he has the group around him to do it as well. And I've never seen a guy so determined. He doesn't care if he wins the heart. He's going to win the heart. He's winning all these individual trophies. He doesn't care about that. He'd give them all up for a Stanley Cup championship, and that's what he wants right now, and he's going to be a really, really tough guy to stop.
I dodged Adler's question about whether or not he thinks that if the Oilers don't win this year, it might be a problem for retaining the superstar talent in Edmonton. Both 29 and 97, Draisaitl and McDavid still under contract, but you don't take for granted that a star could request a trade. I doubt I see that happening this year, but let's say hypothetically, I'm not calling it. I don't even like to talk about it, but Adler asked the question, fair question, real talk. Let's say the Kings beat the Oilers in round 1. What do you think the implications might be for this nucleus that GM Ken Holland has put together? I don't think there's anybody demanding out.
No one will be demanding out of him. No, it's a great team. They understand. There's a great team, and you basically harken back. Remember the days in the Oilers where they were supposed to be the best team in the league, and they got knocked out by the Kings in the first round, and they didn't blow up that team. No one's saying, "Okay, I want out of this organization." These guys know what they have. They know. They look around. They go, "Guys, we're a championship caliber team."
Yeah.
You'd hate to think if they stumbled, they would all tear the team apart. You won't. You don't tear up a championship caliber team, and that happens. You remember Tampa was the best team in the league, and they went in there and they got swept by the Columbus Blue Jackets of all teams
after setting a record.
Exactly, setting a record for
regular season wins. Yeah,
and then so it happens, and then they know that. But you do have Leon Draisaitl for another 3 years, I believe. Connor McDavid for another 4 years. So that's your window there. That's your winning window. And the only issue is that you're going to have to re-sign these guys at a much higher cost. So you're hoping that salary cap goes up, but they're going to be expensive players. You look at the money they're going to throw Connor McDavid anywhere in the league. That's going to be able
for 20 right now.
It's unbelievable.
He would deserve it.
He's going to get the max, whatever they can give him as a max salary. So this is their window. everyone recognizes it. Ken Holland recognizes it. The team recognizes it. The coaching staff recognizes it. This is a 2 or 3 year window. If they lose this year, they're not going to blow up the team. They're going to keep this team. They're going to try and keep this core for at least the next 3 seasons, because if they manage to win, they don't want to win just one. They want to have that maybe a chance to win 2 or 3, or they want to do what Tampa Bay did. Tampa Bay really kept that solid nucleus together, won the 2 cups, went to another final, still a contender, and I think that's the road the Oilers want to take.
I can already hear my buddies saying, Justin, what the hell are you doing talking about the Oilers losing? And what's going to happen? They haven't even played game 1 yet. For what it's worth, I do see Edmonton coming out of the Western Conference. Yep. Let's talk. Let's have some fun with this. Winnipeg Jets, the Vegas Golden Knights. Winnipeg has some of these X factors. They've got a goaltender that can win games, maybe win series. Yep. They've got star power, but for some reason, people just don't seem to believe that the Jets could be the team to come out of the West. What do you think, them in Vegas?
Well, I do like the fact that they have Hellebuyck is an X factor, because I don't think Golden Knights have the goal. They're probably going to go with Laurent Brossoit or the other young goalie that they have there. So, but it's funny because you look at the Golden Knights and you think, okay, there's talent on that team. They have a pretty talented team, but they just kept winning. Like the Oilers were on their tail for the last 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't make up any ground. I think they made up 3 points in 6 weeks or something like that. So the Golden Knights know how to win, and they've been there before. A lot of guys have been there before. Their only weakness is their goaltending. Like you cannot let in a bad goal in the playoffs, a game in the playoffs. And I think, and you have Connor Hellebuyck, who's been there before. They've gone to the conference final. These 2 teams had met in the conference final a couple years ago. And he's always an X factor because he could steal a game for you.
So who do you think is going to win this series?
I think the series will go 6. I do think the Vegas Golden Knights just have a deeper team.
You think Vegas is going to win it?
I think Vegas is going to come out of it. They just have a deeper team. Hellebuyck may steal a game or 2, but I do think they have a deeper team. But my concern is with their goaltending, especially if they go with Laurent Brossoit, who's played well. He hasn't played poorly. Former Edmonton Oil King. Yeah. He's played well, but the playoffs is just a different
Johnny, do you have a pick coming out Winnipeg Vegas series? Do you have a read on this one?
Oh yeah, I like Vegas for that.
You like Vegas in this one?
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone does, but as Adler said, it'd be great to see the Jets pull off.
It would be awesome. And Winnipeg fans too.
Oh,
they do the whole whiteout thing.
Winnipeg
are
obviously, they're just as excited as Edmonton fans.
Bonkers.
It's a fantastic atmosphere in Winnipeg.
The Avs and the Kraken. Is Seattle? Don't count them out. I mean, is this? I think Colorado in 5. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think Seattle's happy to be there. They're second-year team. They're happy to be there. Things didn't go as planned last year. They don't have any real stars on their team. They have a nice, good, solid nucleus, and they're playing well, and they played really well. So there's not a lot of weaknesses on that team, but they just don't have that star talent on that team. So they need everyone to play well all the time, and that's always tough when you need everyone going it all the time. They're not going to knock off the
I think it's going to be a
Colorado.
series.
Yeah, I think Colorado will win in 5, maybe 6, but it's going to be interesting. I think they're happy to be there, and the Seattle's going to enjoy the first round.
Dallas has some great young talent.
Yep.
Obviously, Heiskanen on the blue line, and Jason Robertson with an unbelievable year, like coming out basically as a superstar. But they've also got some aging talent as well. Dallas has a window to win it, and they're up against Kirill Kaprizov and the Minnesota Wild. How do you see this one playing out?
I really like Dallas in this series, and just because Minnesota Wild they've always kind of been there, but they're just such a nondescript team. They've never really gone on a big run. They've never really, they don't have that playoff savvy experience. They're just there. Oh, the Minnesota Wild are in the playoffs, and they've never gone really far in the playoffs. But I just do think the Stars do have that experience. They have that playoff savvy. They do have a bit of that star talent. I just think that they will get past the Minnesota. Minnesota's got a good young nucleus, got a good young core, but this won't be their year. So I can't see them knocking Dallas off.
You got Dallas. If you're just tuning in live streaming on the Mixlr audio app, we're talking to Derek Van Diest, NHL.com contributor. I love this one. I love geographical proximity. I love Devils v. Rangers. Awesome. The Devils, some of the brightest young stars in the National Hockey League. The Rangers have loaded up on the older guys. They got Patty Kane. They got Tarasenko. They got some interesting storylines to follow. Obviously, a dynamic power play. How do you see this one going?
That's going to be a great series. Like when those two, like you talk about rivalries, Edmonton, Calgary. You talk about those great rivalries. Jersey, New York Rangers is right up there. Like because teams can go to both sides. Like it's just
totally
incredible. Like rivalries in the stands, the rivalries on the ice. I do like this rivalry, but I do like the Rangers just a little bit more than the Devils. The Devils had a fantastic year. They've struggled for a long time. They've come out of that, and they do look like they have a nice young core. But I just think the Rangers are more prime team, more experienced team. They're more built to win now as opposed to the Devils. I think they're building a young core that'll be really, really good in 2-3 years to come out of the East there. So I think it's going to be a war. I think it's going to be a fantastic series. This will go 7.
Yeah.
But I do think the Rangers pull this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Rangers could come out of the East. They're not my pick to come out of the East, but they could. You never know. Goaltending like that. You got Adam Fox. You got, obviously star players like Zibanejad. Hurricanes, Islanders. Is this one going to be over quickly?
Well, it's funny because, the Hurricanes are missing Svechnikov. They're missing their top player. The Islanders were a team that was supposed to be on the rise. They kind of took a step back, and now they're back. They just got in the playoffs. I don't know. I don't see a lot of interest in this series, to be honest with you. Like, again, Carolina, geographically, you don't see a lot of Carolina Hurricane games. So you don't know a lot about that team. And I do think the Islanders will come out of this one. Carolina always seems to be the team. They're almost there. They're almost ready to get over the hump, and they never do. They never seem to get over the hump, and I don't see them getting over the hump now. And I do think the Islanders will somehow pull that one off.
Do you have Bruins sweeping the Panthers, or do you think that Matthew Tkachuk and that club could give the defending President's Trophy champions a bit of a headache in round 1?
No, that'll be over in 5 at the most, maybe 6.
You have the Bruins dominating the series.
They're just such a dominant team. Like you watch that team and they just keep coming over the boards at you. There's no weaknesses on that team. The fourth line, 1 to 4 line, they just keep coming at you. They have great goaltending, great defensemen. They're the package. There's a reason they won as many games as they won this year, because there's just not a lot of holes there. And it's funny because their coach might win Coach of the Year, but all you have to do is open the gate and just let them roll. And we asked him about that, and he said, "Oh yeah, I just opened the gate, just let them go." Because it just been fantastic. Just all seasons. They've been a treat to watch. They've been on TV a lot, so you watch a lot of Bruins games. They're a real national draw in the United States, and they have a great team. So I think they're gonna roll for the first couple rounds, and then maybe when they get to the Eastern Conference Final, it depends on the opponent, be a little tougher. But I can't see them to give them any problems in this
even
series.
Though this particular Bruin does get a lot of press and does get a lot of love, I still think that Charlie McAvoy might be the most underrated player in the National Hockey League. I wouldn't place him too far. I mean, I think Cale Makar is on his own planet. I think as the best defenseman in the league by a mile. Yeah. But I think Charlie McAvoy is a top 3 or I think he's maybe a top 2 defenseman in the league, and I think that he could have a coming out party in the playoffs.
I think so too. Yeah, he'll be playing 25 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, we've known that this will get the final matchup. We're talking Derek Van Diest in the first round. This one has been. They've been on a collision course for almost 30 games. The Toronto Maple Leafs and the Tampa Bay Lightning. For Toronto to get through this psychologically, I think would be huge. What are you looking for in this series?
It's a mental thing with Toronto here, getting out of the first round. Like, it's just they've always had they seem to have the superior team, but for whatever reason they keep dropping the ball when they get out of the first round. I remember they had Montreal on the ropes. They couldn't get out of it. They have had so many chances to get out of this first round and they haven't been able to do it. I do think this is the year they do it. I do think that, when you have such disappointment, you learn from that disappointment. And I do think that guys like Marner and Matthews and those guys have learned from that disappointment. I really do think and there's so much pressure on. You talk about the pressure on the Oilers here. That pressure in that Toronto market. That's a lot of pressure to play under. That there's so much expectations there. The team hasn't won in so long, and every team they have, every time they have a decent team, they're already talking about Stanley Cup championships and things like that. I do think they get out. I think they have just a bit more than Tampa Bay does, but it's just such a mental thing with the Leafs right now. It's a whole organization, and there's a lot of pressure on this organization because I think if they do lose in the first round, then I think the coach is gone. I think the GM is gone. I think that there's going to be wholesale changes in Toronto. And I don't think you talk about maybe McDavid running out.
I think
Matthews might be a guy that
he's
says,
got one more year.
I'm good. Let me go play somewhere where it's not as pressure cooker as it is here, because I just think Matthews wants to be a little bit like Tkachuk, where he wants to go somewhere where maybe the heat is not as on, and he can play loose, he can play free, which what Matthew Tkachuk did. He had a great year in Florida, but there wasn't that pressure on him that there was in Calgary. So I think Matthew's in that similar vein. So there's a lot of pressure on the Leafs to win this because that team could get dismantled if they don't, but I do think they have enough talent to get over Tampa Bay, who's kind of on the way down now. They've crested and they're trying to just hold on to what they had, but eventually Tampa's going to have to look at that team and say, okay, we're going to have to start all over again.
Tampa still has those big names.
Yeah.
You know, you got Vasilevsky, you got Hedman, although who knows, how healthy he'll be through the playoffs. Of course, you got Stamkos, Kucherov, you got all these great players. But yeah, at the same time, who knows? That's the battle of two titans in the Eastern Conference with the Leafs and the Lightning.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the Leafs get out of the first round, but also I'd love to see it when they don't. You know what I mean?
You love to see the anguish in Toronto, especially because you get so much Eastern. All those stories about McDavid wanting out and time to move McDavid. They're all based out of Toronto. They come out of Toronto. That's the only place they come out of, because they were all upset that McDavid ended up in Edmonton when he got drafted. Oh, he's gonna hate Edmonton. He's gonna hate playing Edmonton, and McDavid loves playing in this city. So it just you just maybe for that reason alone. But I think the playoffs are more exciting when the Leafs are going a little further. It's going to be interesting to see if they can get out of the first round. But you want as many Canadian teams to move on. You want the Jets. You want
100%.
the Oilers. You want the Toronto Maple Leafs to move on. I wanted the Calgary Flames to make the playoffs as well, because it's always fun when the two Alberta teams are in the playoffs at the same time. It doesn't happen a lot, so it's really fun when it happens. So yeah, you want the Canadian teams to have success, and I think the league does too, because the more success Canadian teams have, the more energy and the more excitement the playoffs generate. Not that they don't generate a lot in the States, but in the States they're competing with a lot of things right now. They're competing with baseball, they're competing with other sports, right? Here in Canada, it's all about the Stanley Cup playoffs, and the further your team goes, the more exciting it gets.
Before I know you've got an entire day's work ahead of you. The good news is you got to walk about 70 feet across the street to Rogers Place. But one of the big stories to follow, you mentioned the Calgary Flames, and perhaps even more so, Sidney Crosby of Getting Mountain and the Penguins, Alex Ovechkin and the Capitals, some notable omissions from the first round this year. Which of those three teams, or another, surprises you most of those that missed the dance?
Calgary does, because I thought Calgary had a good core, had a good nucleus. Now they lost 2 star players, and I thought they did a good job of replacing those 2 star players. But I think that there's a misconnect between ownership and management, because ownership hired the coach, not management. And now ownership saying, well, we want this guy to be our coach. We may get rid of our manager, but whatever manager you bring in here, the owner's going to say, well, I've already hired the coach. Now we've seen here when the owner meddles, that's disaster. The owner's got to stay out of things, right? We saw it here with Daryl Cates a little bit, where he was trying to make some personnel decisions. It didn't work out well. And then Daryl Cates said, okay, I'm going to step away. You guys run the team. I'll just pay the bills. That's how it works.
Was that after the Yakupov draft?
A little bit. Yakupov, and there's some other guys that, Mike Comrie was a recommendation of what I understand from Daryl Cates. So he stepped away and the team did well. So I think that's the issue in Calgary right now, is that ownership thinks, you know what, we have some suggestions and we want, and no, it doesn't work that way. Hire good people to run your team and then get out of the way. And that's the way it is in any organization. You have to hire people that are smarter than you, that are better than that. You have to surround yourself with a good group of people. And that's why I've always admired Ken Holland, because as smart as Ken Holland is, he wants smarter people around him. He wants really good people around him. He doesn't have this ego where he's like, I got to be the smartest guy in the room all the time. What I say goes. No, Ken Holland does a great job of surrounding himself with people with good, honest opinions, and he takes those opinions and he listens to those people. It's one thing to get an opinion from someone and say, oh, I'm going to do it my way anyway. He does that, and I think that's what makes him so successful. And he learned that very, very early on in his management career days, and he's continuing here. And you look at the Oilers, and you look at the team that they've put together, management-wise and coaching-wise and scouting-wise, it's a lot better than it had been in the past, because he's going out to getting the best people, and he's not afraid to say, hey, this guy knows a bit more than I do. I'm going to bring him on my team.
Brian Burke, Ron Hextall, both fired.
Yes.
From Penguins brass, obviously, and you've got a team that's just re-upped Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang. They've still got Sidney Crosby in a window. Crosby had more than 90 points this year. He's still obviously at a status where he can play at an elite level. What do you do if you're the incoming president of hockey ops or general manager for the Pittsburgh Penguins? I mean, what would you do differently? Where was the mistake? Where was the breakdown there? This is a team, obviously, that has a huge urgency.
Yes, and that's the thing. My first thing is I'd sit down with Sidney Crosby and say, what are your goals for the next 3 or 4 years?
They're not trading him,
No, they're not trading him. But I don't know if he wants to be part of a big rebuild either. I don't know if he wants to spend the last 4 or 5 years of his career with a young team rebuilding. He may. I don't know. He may. He's won his 3 cups. He may say, you know what? I will be part of this rebuild and I will help this franchise. Because they're going to have to start.
Tough to rebuild with new contracts for Malkin and Letang, though.
It is tough to rebuild. So maybe could be one of the reasons they got fired, right? Because they're looking at that going, okay, well, we have these guys, and we're in the salary cap area. So, but we can't surround them with other players because we have no money, right? That's the problem, and I think that's the first thing you got to do is you got to say, what is the direction of the Pittsburgh Penguins? Are they still want to consider themselves contenders for next year, or are they going to have to kind of reload and bring in some young talent? So,
of course, with another former Edmonton Oil King goaltender, Tristan Jarry, there, who had a really tough year himself. So, great year when he was playing, but a tough year staying on the ice.
Yeah, exactly.
Derek Van Diest, you can read his work at NHL.com, and of course you can follow him on Twitter at Derek Van Diest. This just felt like the morning we wanted to sit around and have some hockey talk.
Absolutely
We're super
perfect.
excited.
Yeah,
we're going to have highlights on all our screens the minute we wrap up this show, DVD.
Sure. I'm so excited. It starts all at 5 today.
Yeah, buddy.
And then we'll keep going. Big game at 8 o'clock. I'm excited. I think you can sense the vibe in the city. I'm walking over. You can always sense the vibe. It's going to be such an exciting time.
Yeah, man. Good to see you, DVD.
Thanks for having
Congrats
me.
on the new gig, pal.
No problem.
Yeah, make sure you read Derek's work at NHL.com, of course, through the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. This conversation was presented by our friends at Friesen Brothers, who want to remind you about all the resources available right now on their website, Friesen.com. That's Freson. You can check out some of the cool stuff they have happening, including their Family Essentials flyer. This is a resource that we love in our household. You can view it online. As a family business that started in 1955, Friesen Brothers has always been focused on family, and so they understand families are busy. They also understand that sometimes, most times, budget can play in to your dinner plans. They take both things into consideration as they put some amazing and easy family meal solutions together, including one pan to feed them all. You can check out what I'm talking about today at Friesen.com. 16 locations across the province. Friesen Brothers is Alberta-owned, Alberta-grown. Our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park want to remind you about some of the hot eats and cool treats that they have available in their stores in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. I oftentimes wrestle with this. I get really excited about one Dairy Queen menu item. Like last year, it was the churro dipped cone. Yeah, I said churro dipped cone. But then I realized, well, gosh, it's been a while since we've talked about the chicken strip baskets, for example. What about the sauced and tossed honey barbecue glazed chicken strip basket? You can also check out the chicken strips and fry rings combo. You don't have to make that choice between those crisp Dairy Queen fries and the world-class onion rings. You can learn more about it, of course, at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Make sure you let them know that Real Talk sent you. And for those families that are keen on keeping money in the pocket, who isn't these days? When it comes to electricity, natural gas, and internet, who are you giving your business to? Can we recommend you take 2 minutes at some point this week and check out parkpower.ca? You can compare rates on all 3 utilities. I'm going to tell you what, spoiler alert, you're going to end up paying less with Park Power, especially when you use that promo code REALTALK23, which knocks $50 off your first bill for each of the services you go with. That's electricity, natural gas, and internet. The promo code is REALTALK23 at parkpower.ca. Well, we love giving Real Talkers shouts out when you have had an impact or an influence on our content, and that includes right now. every Monday, the first show of every week, our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy, you can get a free solar quote today at kubyenergy.ca. They give us an opportunity to focus on stories that warm our hearts, stories that make us happy, stories of people paying it forward, or random acts of kindness, or sometimes stories that remind us how lucky we are to have animals like dogs. This is a story that was suggested by one of you in our live chat last week for Positive Reflections, and this is the story of two dogs from right here in Canada called Sadie and Rolo, and in just a second we'll roll the video. You got to hear this. This is absolutely amazing. They're two pups that became friends during the pandemic. Now, Sadie is a Husky German Shepherd mix. Rolo is a Rottweiler Shepherd mix. And when they had to move apart, Rolo's owner relocated for a new job. They realized that the pups just weren't the same. They missed each other. And so now every Thursday, the dogs FaceTime. Yeah, the dogs have a FaceTime date. And, well, here's an example of how it plays out. It's an absolutely heartwarming story and one that made our day. We love when these stories are submitted by real talkers just like you. You can send us your positive reflection to talk@ryanjesperson.com or hit us up on social media. You'll find Real Talk RJ online at Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Use the hashtag RealTalkRJ to make sure we see it. That's Positive Reflections, presented by our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy. We've got a whole lot coming up this week. Great shows, episodes you won't want to miss. If you subscribe to our weekly email, you've probably already read all about it. Go to ryanjesperson.com. At the bottom of the page is where you can sign up for our email newsletter. Every single week, the highlights that have happened and the highlights to come right here on your favorite show, Real Talk. We'll see you tomorrow.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.